We're live.
Okay. Good morning. This is Cleveland City Council Transportation Committee, September 30th, 2020. And before we begin, I will read our famous disclaimer. This meeting is being held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration and will be conducted as a virtual meeting in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws as amended by Sub-House Bill 197. The viewing public may watch these meetings on YouTube and on TV 20 on your cable system if you have Spectrum, or stream live on TV 20. You can go to the Cleveland City Council website for more information on how to watch this morning's proceedings. That's www.clevelandcitycouncil.org. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Cleveland,
Here.
Slight,
Here.
Bishop,
Here.
Conwell, Johnson, Joe Jones.
Here.
Santana. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. And I will note for the record, ask the clerk to note that Councilwoman Santana and Councilman Johnson are excused this morning. And I'll also note for the record that the only thing on our agenda this morning is the presentation from Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. There is no legislation to approve. And with that, I am going to move to our guest. And again, our guest is Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, and they will present to the Transportation Committee on the results of their system redesign survey that took place over the past few months. And I will note also that this is a part of RTA's strategic plan for the future, one of the prongs of their strategic plan. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Eric Johnson with RTA. And Mr. Johnson, first of all, I'd like you to introduce who's at the table with us and how you will proceed with the presentation.
Good morning. We want to extend thank you to you, Chair Councilman Phyllis Cleveland, members of Cleveland City Transportation Committee, and other council members for engaging GCRTA in a conversation regarding our system redesign effort. We'd also like to thank council support staff, Ms. Miller, Ms. Stiggers, Ms. Moss, as well as our own IT department for help making this activity possible. Today for our presentation, in the room for the conversation, we have Ms. India Birdsong, General Manager and Chief Executive Officer of GCRTA. We have Dr. Flonse Caver, Deputy General Manager and Chief Operating Officer. We have Mr. Joel Freilich, Director of Service Management, who will be leading some of this presentation. Mr. Jeff Mackel, Planning Team Leader and Project Leader for the System Redesign effort. And with your lab, who also did work on the actual project for the System Redesign presentation. And at this time, I will turn it over to Ms. Birdsong.
Good morning. This is India Birdsong, General Manager for GCRTA. We appreciate you allowing us to present to you this morning. We do have a interesting synopsis of our system redesign study and fair equity study. We'd like to be able to give you a glimpse of what we're doing regarding the system redesign and our plans moving forward based on a lot of the input that we've received from residents, as well as collaborations with downtown partnerships and stakeholders internally and externally as well. We hope that this gives you a bird's eye view of the system as a whole and how we might work to be able to improve the service that we provide every day. So with that, I will hand it over to our operational division, starting with Dr. Flonse Caver and then moving over to Mr. Joel Freilich, who is very integral into the process and the design work that we'll present to you today.
All right, thank you, Ms. Birdsong. Good morning, Chair Cleveland and members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Dr. Flounce Caber, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the Greater Cleveland RTA. Today, we're excited to share with you the results of our system redesign study. As Chairwoman Cleveland said, it was one of our 5-pillar studies that is informing our strategic plan. And what I want to tell everyone is that we're going to be given an overview. We will make ourselves available for any council person who would like us to come to their community or to meet with them personally to provide how the system redesign may affect them locally in their ward or in areas of interest. And so we're given a high-level presentation here today, but we will make ourselves available and are available should there be any follow-up questions or a more detailed presentation needed for specifics. And with that, Joel Freilich is the Director of Service Management here at the Greater Cleveland RTA, and his team has engaged with the community and the consultants to develop this final project. Mr. Freilich.
Thank you, Dr. Caber. If the staff would permit sharing the screen of the presentation that I provided, that would be very helpful. Madam Chair, members of the committee, city council members, and members of the viewing public, it is my pleasure and my privilege to speak to you this morning about our system redesign study and a related fair equity study. Look forward to more detailed conversations with you in the future. If I could have the next slide, please. I want to tell you about the effort that GCRTA led over the past year, one of the 5 pillars of our strategic plan. And the pillar that I'm particularly referring to is the system redesign study. We spent the entire year of 2019 on this study, and we had partners from a consulting firm, Jarrett Walker and Associates. We also reached out and gained partnerships with key stakeholders, including the City of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, NOACA, ODOT, and others. I'll now, if I may have the next slide, briefly tell you how we spent 2019 through a combination of technical and design work shown on the left side of the screen in red boxes, as well as deep, extensive public involvement shown on the right side of the screen in blue boxes. And the flow over the year is represented from the top of the screen down to the bottom. The key thing we were seeking to learn, and that we did learn, is what are the values of our community and the priorities of our community with respect to public transportation. Because public transportation is all about choices. The first task was to document in an academic way a key trade-off between 2 wonderful things that public transportation provides. Public transportation provides frequent, convenient service in some areas, so frequent and so convenient that people choose it because of its convenience, and they ride it a lot. And they ride it instead of using other methods of transportation, and that produces all kinds of environmental benefits and reduces congestion and makes for a thriving city. Public transportation does something else. It provides the opportunity to travel to far-flung areas of the county, distant areas that were built more recently and were built with automobiles in mind, but not everybody wants to use an automobile. Not everybody has access to an automobile. This access to far-flung areas is called coverage. The system covers nearly all of the county. But in traveling to far-flung areas, it is not necessarily quick or convenient because of the long distances and because those areas are not really built with the kind of infrastructure that transit riders like to have, such as sidewalks on both sides of the street and crosswalks on all legs of all intersections and walk signals, and buildings close to the road so that it's not a long way after you get off the bus to when you get to your destination. Nevertheless, residents of the built up transit-friendly areas of our county, such as the city of Cleveland, still want and need some basic access to those far-flung areas where they may have found a job opportunity. So we asked our community, do you value both of those things? And how do you weigh their value? And do you value one more than the other, and by how much? And through that series of questions to the public, drawings of Cuyahoga County maps and how they might look, sending those back to the public in item 2 on the right, which do you prefer? And then drawing out final ideas about how could we reconfigure the money we have, not with more, not with less, but just reconfigure the resources and draw the networks differently in response to what the community told us. And one other item on the lower left of the slide, where it says expanded funding, we also asked the community, if we got expanded funding, how would you feel we should spend that? And what the community told us is this: with existing funding, the community values both the frequent service in the core area and the opportunity to travel to outlying communities where there may be job opportunities and other opportunities. The community values those almost equally, with maybe a slight preference for more frequency. The community, when asked about expanded funding, said quite definitively that any expanded funding we get should go exclusively to more frequent service in the core areas, such as the city of Cleveland and the inner or first suburbs. Using those values, those networks were drawn, and in the lower right slide, we went back to the community with extensive numbers of community meetings at city recreation centers and libraries and city halls, and also online. And we got many, many comments. And overwhelmingly, they felt that the drawings we drew reflected the values, and those drawings were the basis of what we are now going to tell you about today. We are going to tell you today what is our understanding of what the community said. But recognizing that misunderstandings can happen, we will still have, in October and November, another opportunity for public involvement, this time virtually, to give people a chance to comment on the specifics. And that would also include individual stakeholder meetings, and we look forward to those. If I may have the next slide, please. The highlights of what we are presenting to the community in October and November is that we need to connect our community better by prioritizing trips to work, education, and healthcare. We do not have expanded funding. We have only level funding, but we want to reallocate and make trade-offs and discontinue some services that are not very successful and not very well used, and create more frequent service, because frequency is sometimes lacking. And we want to create more frequent service. We will sometimes discontinue a bus on a street, as we propose to do. But where we are proposing to do that, those bus stops that would be discontinued are within a reasonable distance of some other bus stop that will continue to be served, often with greater frequency. Our third goal, more direct transportation. Less need to make transfers between one transit vehicle and another transit vehicle, especially on trips that link cities to suburbs and suburbs to cities. I'll give you a few examples on the next slide. I'll go through those briefly. If I may have the next slide, please, because I will be coming back to them as we focus on specific areas of the city of Cleveland. But here's a nice example of a route extension. Route 14, the Kinsman route. At the left side of the screen, downtown Cleveland. At the right side of the screen, Warrensville Center Road, corner of Warrensville and Chagrin. So the number 14 route serves the Kinsman-Chagrin Road, but it never gets any further than Warrensville Center Road and Chagrin. Anyone wishing to travel further than that today needs to get off and wait for something else to finish their trip. In the next slide, I'd like to show you how we'll extend and modify Route 14. This is what we're going to propose to the public. And if I may have the next slide, please, you'll see that that route has been extended further to the east. The border between red and blue that you see where the red lines turn blue, that is the current terminus of the current 14 at the corner of Warrensville and Chagrin. We will extend that route out in 2 branches, but the branch that's most significant to Clevelanders is the branch with an arrow, which will follow the current route, bus route 5 alignment, and will serve key destinations for education, such as Tri-C East, for medical services, such as at the Hooja Medical Center and another medical center as well. Jobs at numerous places, such as Harvard Park is at that corner, and Pinecrest has jobs, and Chagrin in Windmere has jobs. Moreover, there are residents in those areas who want to come to Cleveland jobs or Cleveland opportunities. This is just one example of how to extend a route, and there's something else that we're going to do with that route, and you can detect it at the left side of the map, where the route has been diverted slightly in the downtown area. Instead of going down Prospect, it's been diverted up to corner of Euclid and 22nd Street, providing access to Kinsman residents directly to the Cleveland State University campus that they do not have on a 1-seat ride today. This is just one example, and there are many. May I have the next slide, please? This is just another brief listing. Extend the 14 as I described, the Kinsman route in the city of Cleveland. Let's look at the 22. Today's 22 on Lorraine Avenue stays entirely in the city of Cleveland. It doesn't even finish the entire city of Cleveland because it stops at West Park Station. So it stops short of Cam's Corner, and it stops short of Fairview Hospital in Cleveland. We will extend that route and make it more frequent. And it'll go all the way to the Westgate Transit Center, which has other opportunities for transfer and for direct access. The number 26 and the CSU line on Detroit and on Clifton, they do go as far as the Westgate Transit Center, but no further. We will extend both of them, extending the Detroit Avenue service all the way to Westlake, and extending the Cleveland State Line on Clifton, serving Clifton residents in Cleveland, all the way to North Olmsted. We will link the Steelyard in Clark Avenue to Madison Avenue in Lakewood, providing better access to Steelyard Commons. We propose to extend the East 105th Street route to Collinwood and also the city of Euclid. We propose to extend the Quincy Avenue route, which never leaves the city of Cleveland today, via Cedar Road to serve job opportunities that all along Cedar out to 271. We propose to link together the existing Payne-Huff route, realign that Payne-Huff route so that it can follow Mayfield Road after visiting the clinic on 105th and Euclid, follow Mayfield Road to all those jobs and medical services along Mayfield. I'll come back to these in sectors of the city. If I may have the next slide, please. Another huge important thing that we're doing, for which we are diverting resources from less important things, is to provide better frequency. Red on this map, this is the current RTA map representing frequency. Red are routes that operate all day every 15 minutes, and we're representing the weekday, midday. In other words, what frequency can you count on having all day long on weekdays? As you see in the current RTA map, there are only a few streets where you can rely on finding 15-minute service all day long. They include Euclid Avenue, they include the Route 15 Harvard, they include rail lines, the entire red line, and the shared portion of the blue and green lines. Not much else is every 15 minutes. The blue represents 30-minute service, and there are a few more streets that have 30-minute service or better all day long. Now, keep this map in mind as the staff moves to the next slide to show you what we propose, and watch how many more lines are red and how many more lines are blue. Now we're looking at 15-minute service in addition to the ones I mentioned before, 15-minute service on Detroit in Cleveland, on Lorraine in Cleveland, on St. Clair in Cleveland, on Superior in Cleveland, in addition to the Euclid, which already has 15 minutes or better. And what about the Cleveland residents who need to get beyond the city limits for work, school, medical, or other reasons? Those who need to ride out Mayfield Road will experience 30-minute service all day instead of less than that today. Those who need to go out Cedar, 30 minutes. Many other extensions are 30 minutes. If I might ask the staff to just go back one slide briefly and come forward one slide just to see how, and the former, today's service, many green lines of 40 to 45 minutes, and most of those green lines turn blue. Many of the blue turn red. Frequency is a very important concept. When you are done with what you need to do, such as you've clocked out of your work shift or you've finished with your medical services, you now want to get home. How long will it be before you can get home? The most important factor determining how long will it be before you can be in your home after work is this question. When I walk out of my work building, how long will it be before the bus picks me up? And the second most important question is, after I ride that bus, will that bus ride take me all the way to my neighborhood where I live, or will I have to change buses to get to my neighborhood? This turns out to be a more important factor. Studies have shown and proven that this is more important than how many minutes after I'm finally in my home neighborhood will I have to walk 3 or 6 or 9 minutes in my home neighborhood is less important than will I have to wait 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour before I first board the vehicle outside of where I work. If I may have the next slide, please. The main features of what we propose, and again, with no new funding, those frequency improvements require some sacrifice. We're proposing not to operate trolley routes downtown. Instead, we propose frequent service on the downtown streets. The trolleys take care of you only if you stay within downtown. Our regular routes take care of you even if you're going to or from or within downtown. Regular routes serve downtown and neighborhoods. Trolleys stay downtown. We will have no bus on Prospect. We'll sacrifice that because Prospect is very near to Euclid. We will retain only one of the 3 suburban park and ride routes. We'll divert all those resources to provide frequent service on every downtown street of importance. St. Clair, frequent. Superior, frequent. Euclid, frequent. The Detroit Superior Bridge, frequent. We will also end most west side routes coming in at or near Public Square. This will give us, they don't need to continue further east on Superior because Superior will always have frequent service. If I may have the next slide, please. We'll go through 4 more areas. Near east side of Cleveland. Suppose you live on the near east side of Cleveland. What will you experience in terms of change? What will you have to adjust to? Under this proposal, you'd have to adjust to no bus running on and along East 55th or East 79th or East 123rd/125th. You would see no bus on Cedar because Euclid is close by. You would see no bus on Buckeye because the Rapid is nearby. But with those sacrifices, what do you gain? Very much more frequent service on St. Clair, on Superior, on Euclid, on Kinsman and on East 105th Street. Twice today's frequency on Payne and Huff, 30-minute instead of hourly. The Payne Huff route would be reconfigured. Instead of going up 123rd and 125th, it would go out Mayfield Road. The Quincy route would be reconfigured. Instead of driving on Buckeye close to the rapid, those buses would extend all the way out to suburban jobs on Cedar Road. And that 8, which wouldn't go on Cedar anymore, but there's another part of the 8 that's important. The Route 8 doesn't just go on Cedar. It goes on East 116th Street. And we would add resources to East 116th Street, providing that street with 7-day service instead of 5 days today. If I may have the next slide, I'll talk about Northeast and then Southeast and then West side of Cleveland. Northeast, what are the features? More residents of the Northeast side of Cleveland will have a direct 1-seat ride to all the jobs, all the education, and all the health care that can be found in the University Circle area. How will we do that? We will modify Route 10. Route 10 is the East 105th Street and East 93rd and Woodhill route. It'll follow the current alignment from the southeast part of Cleveland. It'll follow 93rd as today, Woodhill as today, 1 block of Quincy as today, East 105th Street, all the way from Quincy, across Superior. When it gets to St. Clair, it's got about less than half a mile left to go. It isn't going to continue north of St. Clair anymore to the DuPont Loop. Instead, it'll turn right on St. Clair and travel northeast, and then it'll turn left on East 140th Street. And then it'll continue out Lakeshore, so that Collinwood residents will be able to get on a number 10 that goes to places as important as the Cleveland Clinic and the Veterans Administration Hospital and everything else at University Circle. And if they wish to transfer to something else, will have opportunities to transfer to the Health Line or the Red Line. That's a very important reprioritization in the Northeast. The number 1, St. Clair, you know about some of the trips go only to East 153rd near Collinwood High. Under our renovation or repurposing of one, all the trips would go just that far. There still would be coverage of Outer St. Clair by a new route, 31, to link Outer St. Clair to Windermere. And between those improvements of the 31 and the improvement to the 10, they will take care of the needs currently served by the number 30, along with a realignment of 37. What will be sacrificed? An important sacrifice is the number 39 that connects northeast suburbs and northeast Cleveland to downtown. Will operate only during rush hours. The midday service is not very well used, and that will be sacrificed in order to provide these improvements. Let me go to the southeast, if I may have the next slide. Southeast side of Cleveland, I already discussed something very important about better connections to the corner of Richmond and Harvard, which offers jobs, education at Tri-C East, and healthcare. Another improvement is that all trips on Route 15 will follow one main route. There'll be an adjustment for those who use a handful of trips that go via Walden and Union in rush hour only. They will need to use alternative service, but the advantage is that every trip on the 15 will be consistent, the frequency will be high, and every trip will go to Tri-C East. And we'll have this direct link. So therefore, the number of neighborhoods that will have a direct link to Richmond and Harvard, including Tri-C East, will now include everybody on Kinsman, everybody served by the 15 on Harvard, and also those served by the number 19 on Broadway and Miles will have, for the first time, their route will say on Tri-C East. May I have the next slide? And there are 2 slides to talk about the west side of Cleveland, because there's quite a bit of material there. Lakeview Terrace residents will have an adjustment. They'll need to be walking to Detroit Avenue, which is what they do today on Saturdays and Sundays. So I'm gonna go one slide forward, if I may, to the west side slide. Okay, so in Lakeview Terrace, there won't be an 81 anymore, so they won't have a bus right in front of Lakeview Tower. I guess we're having a little technical difficulties, but I'm sure they'll be resolved. I'll continue to talk. But remember, when they walk to Detroit, which is what they are doing today on evenings and weekends, they will find when they get to Detroit an improved, lengthened, and more frequent version of the 26. Residents of Tremont West, although the 81 is gone and the replacement will not operate 24 hours, but Tremont West will have Tremont West will actually have 24/7 service, right, Jeff? Tremont West will have 24/7 service versus just 5-day daytime service today. And those walks are longer than they are from Lakeview Terrace. So we prioritize them because their walk is longer. More frequent service will occur on Detroit and on West 25th and on Lorraine. There'll even be improved frequency on the number 78 that serves West 117th Street, Bel Air, and Puritas. The number 22, as I mentioned, will be extended beyond just West Park Station, serving Fairview Hospital and Westgate Transit Center. The number 26 Detroit will be extended all the way out to Westlake, with some trips even going to the new Tri-C West Shore campus. The number 55 on Clifton will access jobs and retail opportunities in North Olmsted. If I may have the next slide for a continuation of West Side. There will be a prioritization of Clark over Storer. So Storer will not have as many hours of service in a week, but Clark will do better. And Clark, we think, is a stronger corridor. There is a lot of new residential cultivation in that area. And also Clark is on a straight line between Madison neighborhood of Lakewood and Steelyard Commons. So with these features, more areas will gain direct access to Steelyard Commons. If I may have the next slide, please. I think we're almost ready to wrap up. In summary, through the process last year, the community expressed their wish to redesign the system, even if no new money were available. Now with redesign, inevitably, the system will be less convenient for some kinds of trips, but more convenient for a greater number of trips. Although we think we have a very good solution here, we intend to gather more input in October and November. And we are open-minded and will make adjustments based on what we hear through public involvement from you. We plan extensive, once we have our final service, we do not wish to rush into this and take people by surprise. Instead, we will do an extensive education outreach in the spring. The purpose is to help people plan how to get to their destinations using the new route structure, with implementation targeted for June 2021. May I have the next slide, please? I'm going to be very brief to tell you about one more pillar study. If you could just advance to the next slide. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to be quick about this. We did do another study, fare equity study, to make sure that our fare structure was appropriate. And we did find a need of repair in 2 key areas. If I may have the final slide, please. And we were finding that some of our customers, especially our lower income customers, were paying a financial penalty when they needed to transfer, which we did not intend. And to address that, our board has acted. Our board has changed some rules that will take effect October 4th. And the most important thing to our customers of what the board is changing is that we are reducing the prices of all of the all-day passes. The full price passengers, such as our adults and paratransit passengers, will experience a decrease of $1 sorry, let's say that wrong. A decrease of 50 cents from $5.50 to $5. But the important thing about that $5 is that it's just 2 fares. So for the price of 2 fares, you can ride all day unlimited with transfers. Similarly, the senior disabled fare will be also reduced, this time by 25 cents, to make sure that even a senior can get an all-day pass for the price of 2 fares. And for consistency, we'll reduce all other all-day passes. They're not very much used, but we want to be consistent. And one more thing, for those who don't find that convenient and just are going one way, we're going to allow individuals to buy some 1-trip and 2-trip fare cards and not just 5-trip fare cards as in the past, because some of our customers found that if they don't use the system often, they don't want to buy 5 trips right now, when today they might be only making 1 trip. So that is all I have. I would like to just check first with Doc and then with India, whether there's something to add before we close.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. Thanks for that presentation, Councilwoman Cleveland. I just want to say on behalf of our team, we recognize that this is change. We think that it is a positive change for the community. But as we move through this with members of the community, we surely are available to answer questions and to engage in the COVID-related error waves. And so we are available. Thank you.
This is India Birdsong. I will echo Dr. Kaber's sentiments and Mr. Freilich as well. We really are striving toward a more transparent system and a more transparent approach at trying to explain our reasoning behind the changes that you see before you today. We really want to make this a community effort. We also want to ensure that our stakeholders have a clear understanding of the research that has gone into this, as well as the future planning to be able to streamline a lot of our services, starting with small things like a reduction of 50 cents. We want to kind of take out the obstacles that some of our customers may be facing when it comes to riding the system. So although it can be seen as a small change, it is an incremental change to a larger plan overall as we move forward. And again, to echo the sentiments of Dr. Kaber, if you would like us to come out and explain this in more detail or to different community groups, we're more than happy to do so, so that we ensure that there are no questions on the table come June of 21, which is our intended implementation date for what you see in front of you today. So we appreciate your time and are welcome to take any questions at this time.
Okay. Thank you for that presentation. It's very extensive, but it also raises some questions, I know, for my colleagues and for me. And the first, well, one of our first questions is, who is the contact person at RTA if we want to have presentations at our community meetings or local meetings? I know several of my colleagues have already indicated an interest in that.
If you would contact Joel Freilich,
Sure.
and we will pass that information along to you via email with all of his contact information today.
Okay, if you can send that to our staff people, Mr. John James and Latrice Poole Miller, and they will make sure that all council members get that.
We will do so. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with a couple of questions. But first, Mr. Freilich said in the beginning of his presentation that public transportation is all about choices, and I would just differ in one big regard. And representing a community where I have a third of all public housing in my ward, as well as other neighborhoods that where we have people with low incomes and working class people who are struggling every day to, just to survive. Public transportation for a lot of them is not a choice. It's all they have. And so I would really be interested um, in your fair equity study, you know, I mean, the title was fair equity. And I think in terms of system redesign, I'd like to know, you know, what your feelings on equity are with that, because a lot of what I hear is not necessarily equitable to people who live in our communities, the communities that some council members represent.
Councilman, if I may respond, equity is a big driver in how I think and how our team thinks. And I certainly wouldn't want to be misunderstood as believing that most of our riders have lots of alternatives to public transportation available to them, because I am actually very aware from our surveys and from riding our buses and trains that in fact most of our rides are taken by people who do not have the option of automobile transportation. So it is very much foremost in our mind. I was really referring to choices among routes and not suggesting that people don't need RTA. So equity has been a major motivator in the years that I've spent at RTA since 1991. Equity planning. I'm actually kind of a devotee of Norman Krumholtz, and I do think equity is mainly what we're about. Our goal is to try to make sure that people who do not have a car do not lose out on opportunities as a consequence of not having a car, and do not needlessly suffer from the land use decisions that have been made over the last 50 or 60 years that have put people at a disadvantage increasingly if they don't have access to an automobile. So because so many areas are built with the automobile in mind and not with walking in mind. So I believe we are on the same page, and I'm sorry if my words were ill chosen, because they would not reflect my views.
All right, thank you, Mr. Freilich. Another request I've received. Is it possible for RTA to provide to City Council some larger, the large map boards that you have there? I know you brought them out to community meetings, and my thinking is that we can have some of those, and we will put those in our committee room for council members who couldn't be on the call today, to have an opportunity to come and look at the map and really see it blown up. It's much easier to understand or interpret, you know, the bigger map as opposed to looking at it on a screen.
We will follow up with maps that are Zoom-inable, so that's probably not the right word, but yes, we will follow up with maps. And also, you know, when we open this up for our online public involvement, we will have extensive use of maps that people can zoom in on and examine. So we will provide that for council as requested. We will follow up with council staff.
Okay, thank you, thank you. It's very hard, you know, for some people, you know, myself included, to zoom in and out on the map. It doesn't. So something a little bit much bigger will be very helpful for a lot of us. Okay, my next question, going back to the survey itself, what was the time period that the survey was taken? And what was your methodology? And really, who did you talk to and how did you talk to them?
The period of time in which the study was done with the assistance of Jarrett Walker and Associates was really the entire year leading up to the final presentation to our Board of Trustees that occurred in December of 2019. So it was an entire year of public engagement, in waves of public engagement. We use a variety of ways to let people know that public engagement is beginning. For example, we want to make sure that those who ride our services now are alerted. So we use riders alerts that are on all of our public transit vehicles is one way. We also have many other people who follow us on various social media or who have signed up for a twice monthly email update. And we use all those methods as well to alert people that a system redesign is underway. We made colorful cards that are displayed in all of our vehicles where people ride that say system redesign is underway. We want to hear from you. Here's how you can be involved. We got a good response. We went to numerous in-person meetings where we had very large numbers of staff present, so that we were able to engage one-on-one with people who wanted to talk to us about how they use public transportation, which routes they use, why they use them, what trip purposes, what they value. So we had extensive conversations at places like the Gunning Recreation Center and other city recreation centers, libraries, et cetera. Lots of that. And then a lot of online comments, because we accepted comments online 24/7, and staff read all the comments. So this is what it comes, I hope that's a quick synopsis of where we were getting public involvement.
Okay, thank you. And again, to Mr. Freilich, or to anyone, we've had an unusual year that we're living in. We have an unusual year that we're living in with the impact of COVID on our community, from a health standpoint, as well as from an economic standpoint. And I'm just wondering, none of us really knows, how we're going to come out at the end of this, or, when and how this is actually going to end, or when we can measure that we're at the end of the crisis. And so you have the implementation date of June of 2021, which is not that far away. But again, in light of what we've been living through for the past few months, I don't know if and the impact that is having economically on our TA, whether that's still a realistic time for implementation.
Yeah, so thank you, Councilwoman. This is Flonse Caver, the Chief Operating Officer. And so we have looked at the timing. From a service perspective, we have worked through COVID-19 with several priorities. One of the priorities being to try our best to keep a robust service out there. And so today, as of today, we're operating 93% of our pre-COVID service levels. The reason we're doing so is that the workers and folks who have to take the vehicle still need to be able to get through the community, and cutting service or having less service would just make that a more difficult task for them. When we look at 2021, we're preparing our budget currently, but we do believe that we have budget stability for 2021 and 2022 in our near-term outlook. And so what we want to do is to have a system that allows people better access to those three categories, looking at better access to jobs, better access to healthcare, and better access to education. And so when we look at our role in a community, we're sort of placing our investment first. What we do not want to have happen is that companies would say that they were willing to open, but they couldn't get workers because the service had been pared down in such a way that left some people unable to get there. And so we're running 93% of our service, except for some small areas, but this provides everybody access that they had before. What the system redesign will do is, in our belief, enhance the number of the quality of the trips. Particularly, Joel talked about these one-seat rides where there used to be a route for those of us who may have grew up where you get to a suburb and the route changes, the street name changes, but it's still the bus going down. So we believe that these will make for a better, more frictionless trip for our residents, particularly when at the end there's a job hub. And so that's what we're looking for. And we believe we have the stability and that it's the right time to make those changes.
This is India Birdsong. I will piggyback on Dr. Caver's sentiments. I wholeheartedly agree with his comments. I just would like to also bring to the attention of the room that we really are essential. In fact, the same question or similar question was asked of me yesterday in speaking with a reporter. And my response was that we, if anything, have come to understand that we're an essential service for the community. And for us to close our doors or reduce our service to the point where we aren't able to transport our community members is really doing a disservice to Cleveland and really, kind of acquiescing to the idea that we're not as important as we think. And I think we really have to make sure that we're there for the essential workers that really are supporting the community through something like COVID. And we've got to make sure that this is a continual process. To your point, Councilwoman, it will not be a perfect plan given the current pandemic situation. And as we start to, have different reiterations of planning over time, this is our best estimate of what will be needed in order to keep the lifeline of transit moving so that people have an opportunity to get to work and get to healthcare and get to the grocery store come summer of 2021. If we do find that the Central Business District has rapidly and dramatically changed from what we have planned, we do have flexibility to be able to get back to the drawing board if that is something that we deem necessary. But at this time, we have to also keep in mind that we have to move forward with forward movement so that we don't become stale and we don't become behind the 8 ball. Again, I will say that this is a planning effort, so there is a lot of room for flexibility. But at some point, we have to make sure that we have our arterials taken care of, that we have transportation available for your constituents, and that we actually get people to where they need to be. But it is something that we do plan on, keeping a pulse on as we move forward through the pandemic. And that's why it's so important for us to make sure that we explain what's going on to the community members, so that if we have a large hole or a gap in our thinking where there's a workforce shift, where all of a sudden we're going somewhere where there's no point because people are working from home, or the shift has changed, or the shop or the manufacturing site has closed down and relocated, then that's something that we need to know right away. And again, that's the push. And that's where we need your support to be able to make sure that people are looking at this and taking it seriously and wholeheartedly seriously, so that when it comes time to make the change, we actually can say that we've done that with the community input all around.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Birdsong. Okay, I have a lot more questions, but I'm going to stop because a lot of my questions are more specific to the communities I represent. So I'm going to request a community meeting, but I will give you 2 hint words: Cedar and Prospect. And this predates you, Ms. Birdsong, but Cedar, every time there's a change in RTA or a proposed change, the Cedar line is on that list. And I know a couple of years ago, we also had some issues with Prospect. And so again, I will save my more detailed questions and community questions and ask for a specific meeting on that. But and so I'm going to get, and I'll give my colleagues time to ask some questions. And I'm going to start with the Vice Chair of Transportation Committee, Charles Slife, the councilman in Ward 17.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Joel and everyone over at RTA for this presentation. It's important, and I'll tell you, I ride RTA as much as I can. Obviously, with the pandemic, haven't been going as many places, but I think it's a valuable to have at the end of the street to be able to get to City Hall and be checking emails and stuff on my phone instead of sitting in the car. And Councilwoman, you're right that there's many in our community rely on RTA as a sole source. I think in decades past, it was common for a family to have one car and someone to take the bus. That's what my dad did when I was a kid. And I hope that we can all be advocates for that sort of lifestyle. AAA estimates that owning a car costs you $700 a month. So instead of car ownership being something you graduate into and you have freedom of movement, I like to think of it as being near the transit line. It saves you money and allows you to put money into other places. In RTA, you all have a tough gig. It's a very great system for a mid-sized metropolitan area, but the amount of funding that you and other transit agencies in Ohio get compared to agencies in other states is truly appalling. And I bring that up just because I want everybody on this call and everyone that's listening to remember that there's certainly an advocacy role that we all need to play with state government. when it comes to public transportation. In light of that, I'm wondering if it's possible to get some updated, just a figure on the estimated economic impact of RTA. I don't know if that's readily available, but I think people say, this doesn't make any money, but the people who are going to work and paying taxes, it pencils out in the end. And I think for that reason, it's important that we continue to support the system and help it be as robust as it can be. I took very extensive notes, so I'm going to jump around now. So this might seem out of order. I appreciate the idea of cutting the fare, especially like the all day from $5.50 down to $5, just that extra 50 cents someone might not physically have. And we can talk about other ways to purchase fares as well. And I understand the rationale behind the downtown trolleys. I will say I do worry that people might not be willing to pay a full fare just to hop down the street like they would on the trolley now. But the one trolley that I think has an importance in downtown that I'd like to talk to you guys about is the 912 one. From an economic development standpoint, parking in downtown can be tight and not everybody is willing or able to pay to park in the garage. So to be able to park in the Muni lot and then to take that trolley up 9th Street, I think is very valuable for a lot of downtown employees. And I worry that by cutting that, we're making it tougher for people to work downtown. And, to what degree does someone get so frustrated with the cold walk up 9th that they start looking for jobs elsewhere? So is there any room to talk about that trolley route or other trolley routes and just understand, the potential impact of cutting those?
If I may respond, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair, there's room to discuss all our proposals. Everything that we are proposing here is up for discussion. We welcome the input of stakeholders, of community leaders such as yourselves, and we also welcome in a formal period that starts in October and continues in November. We welcome comments from all who have a comment. So absolutely nothing is frozen in stone. And we would like to hear at another time some more detail about your own views about the various trolleys.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Obviously, this isn't an easy job, and sometimes you got to make tough decisions, and we all recognize that. But I certainly don't want to, end up in a situation where we've cut off our nose to spite our face. So we can follow back up on that. Something through the chair to the RTA staff that I will admit that I don't know much about. Does RTA have a commuter program where when I lived in the DC area 10 years ago as a work benefit for my employer, I got about I think $85 a month in Washington Metro, and in a city like DC where there's a lot of traffic, it's heavily used, and I would like to think or promote such a program in Cleveland to try to create that extra incentive for people to choose RTA. And quite frankly, if there is a program and the city of Cleveland isn't participating in it, Madam Chair, I think that's something that we should talk about. If we preach sustainability, we should certainly walk the walk as well. But to the RTA staff, could you give me background on RTA's relationships and programs that they have with businesses to try to incentivize staff to choose transit?
We do. This is India Birdsong. We do have a commuter advantage program that is available to any in all entities that would like to join that. I'm going to ask staff to be able to provide that information to everyone on the call today. We do have Jim Frick, I believe, is our manager for that particular program. And we've actually started to have discussions this year about how to reinvigorate that particular program. And I'll just say this, is coming from different agencies as well within transportation. That particular program is easily dead on the vine, right? Because it's something where you really are invested in it as a community or not. And I tend to find that it's pretty robust when it first begins. I'm not aware of how long we've had that program in its existence if you all are aware.
20,
Over 20 years is what I'm assuming. And my thought process is that it's probably been pretty quiet over the last 5 or so years. So we do need to be able to have a pretty good push. And it would be great to be able to brainstorm with this body as well as others that you may recommend so that we can really have like a new community push to be able to enroll in that. I think that would be fantastic, really, as we emerge from COVID through the back to work sort of process, because I would imagine a lot of employees and a lot of employers would be interested in that program that maybe hadn't had it in their financial forecasting in years previous. So we'll definitely send you that information and provide that as well to the
Yeah,
overall body.
thank you. I'd love to be a partner in that, and I'm sure that other council members would. Just because it's, anything we can do to, try to get people out of cars and stop expanding highways in, suburban counties, and they're all pieces of the puzzle that come together. That was a quick little dig at a proposal on I-77 in Summit County, if you weren't paying attention. Couple quick questions about the fairs. As we restructure the fairs, I believe right now, if you're at the vending machines or you're buying on the app, that the tickets available don't necessarily include transfers. Is there a way to, I guess, make sure that all types of tickets are available on the app or in the vending machines? And is there a consideration on how transfers are structured, or is that really considered an all-day pass? I ask because this has changed over the years, and I know that there's some confusion among riders on what fare they're supposed to be getting.
If I may, Mr. Vice Chair and Madam Chair, I would like to get back to you with a little bit more information on that, but I will tell you that the fact that the all-day pass is available at every one of those machines, and the fact that the all-day pass is one of the options on the app, if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be the overwhelmingly popular choice. We know from what we've heard from our customers that now that the all-day pass doesn't have that extra 50 cents was perceived as a penalty. It was perceived as a punishment for transferring, because everybody knew that if you made a round trip and you didn't need to transfer, you could pay $2.50 plus $2.50 and end up with $5. And everybody knew that if you wanted to transfer, you had to buy an all-day pass, and that was going to cost you $5.50. That was seen as a penalty. The repeal of what was seen as a penalty is going to be the winner in this category. If we can do more, we will, and I commit to you that we will get back to you to see what we can do, but that we can do, and our machines will drop that price. And our app, we've asked the app company to be sure to drop that price on October 4th as scheduled, and that is going to make a huge difference to people who need to transfer, as well as people who just need to go a lot of places in one day.
Sure, thanks. And I guess this is a good moment to plug the RTA app. It's so easy, and you just kind of show your phone to the driver, or you click it as you go through Tower City. It's incredibly easy. It's a touch free, which is important right now. But between that and the transit app, it's very easy just to pull up and figure out when the next bus is coming in real time. And with that, I can walk out my door and be on the steps of City Hall. 25 minutes, half an hour, and that includes actually a transfer. Last couple quick things. In addition to the request for more precise maps that we can zoom into, if moving towards June, there's any ability to kind of come up with a beta system in an app or whatever source, so people could kind of plug in point A, point B, and learn like how much longer a trip would take or how much shorter, begin to plan out instead of just kind of comparing. And 20 years ago, you get all the different schedules and you're taking down notes of this time and trying to make it work. But to have it, queued into a system that people could just plug it in, I think would be really useful. I know that's not something that you can do on the turn of a dime, but it's I think it'd be useful nonetheless. So if that's something that isn't under consideration at this time, I guess I'd like to make that request. I'll
We're
admit
writing
that.
these down.
Go ahead. Okay.
Just want to say this. Okay.
I'll admit, often when I choose not to take RTA, it is because of some last mile issues. You know, I got a meeting until 5 and I got to go pick up the kid at 6, and you know, the bus doesn't go exactly where I'm going. So you factor in the walk time, and it's you realize it's 15 minutes to drive to go pick up the kid, or it becomes a 45-minute, 50-minute hour thing. And a lot of that is just because of kind of last mile distances. I say, especially on the far west side, like the red line almost goes everywhere. You know, it kind of hugs the edges of neighborhoods instead of going into the middle of them. As part of this, have there been broader conversations about last mile strategies, whether it's bikes or scooters or other ways where you can get people just from a station or a stop to specifically where they're going, and you know, make the crosstown trip on RTA become that much more appealing? What's RTA's role in kind of those broader questions?
So I'll take that one, and then I can punt it around the room as well. As far as my tenure and being here at RTA over the past year, we've had conversations to that effect, and we're really beginning the conversation of connectivity and how we're able to serve as a conduit for that within the community. To be able to have the first mile, last mile conversation is one that I think is really affected by COVID, because typically in mass transit, you start to talk about rideshare services as well that can connect to public transit on that first or last mile to make your commute a little easier. Well, with pandemic, everyone's not really hopping in the Uber and the Lyft so much as they were before. So I think that's going to have an effect on how we're able to create that first last mile journey. But the e-bikes and the scooters are absolutely on the radar, because those are actually usually a one-person deal when it comes to hopping on one of those and then getting to your next destination. I do think it's going to have to take a concerted effort to be able to talk about storage for those bikes and also connections. We currently do not allow e-bikes on our buses and trains. Typically, there are potential fire hazards and electronic issues that we want to ward against so that we don't end up in liability territory. But that being said, there's a huge opportunity for TOD and transit-oriented development, and even shelter locations where they can serve as multi-use facilities where you hop off of the RTA service and then you go to pick up a scooter, or you go to pick up an e-bike and then continue on your way. So I actually do have a conversation later on today with our real estate department to be able to start to talk about those kind of things. And of course, with our operational division, we'll bring those in as well. So to your point, I think that it's absolutely the right time to really push the envelope with those kind of conversations. And we will be coming back to your wards at some point soon to be able to discuss how that's folded into your community, infrastructure-wise, as well as financially.
Thank you,
And
Ms.
one
Burke.
other, we are starting to look at, we are starting to look at fare collection systems as well. That's on our docket for this year to be able to discuss. And a large functionality of that is the technological side to how the fare payment is looked at on maybe even a regional scale, not just us alone. And that's another conversation that we're starting to have with NOACA and different entities like that. As we all are doing our strategic plans, we want to figure out what's giving us the best bang for our buck and what's giving the residents the easiest commute. And so definitely that's part of the conversation, but we're starting that up in recent months and going on into 2021.
Perfect. Thank you.
And Councilman, I'd like to add, you mentioned the transit app and its functionality. One of the things that's happening in the marketplace is that more and more other transportation units are being included in those apps. And so as that technology comes aboard, you can imagine that when you use the transit app, it'll tell you to walk to here, catch a bus to here, and you can catch an Uber to there. The next iteration is that scooter locations and those companies are starting to integrate with transit apps and things of that nature. And so as Ms. Burton talked about fare payment, one of the things that becomes a forward thinking is, can you pay your fare in the transit app such that you can pay your fare and take an Uber for the last mile or get onto a scooter or e-bike? And so we're definitely looking at those. And for our industry, that is the next generation of frictionless travel that you'll hear customers talk about, because they don't really particularly have a loyalty to a specific area, they want to get to it, and it may be 3 modes of transportation, but the app functions are starting to incorporate that, and we're looking at that.
Thank you. My very last thing, Madam Chair, I'm sure that I'm used up all my time, but something I would like to just discuss deeper with RTA offline, but I want to at least plug it here is there's a proposal to the 86 bus on Rocky River Drive to cut it to once an hour. There's a pretty large 400 unit CMHA property on Rocky River Drive south of Puritas Avenue. And, you know, we'll talk about it because I'm concerned about, you know, a CMHA property only having 1 bus an hour, but really it's a segue out of the last mile conversation because we're in this strange scenario. It's only a mile or half a mile, less than a mile to the Puritas Rapid Station. But there's no last, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's no scooters west of West 117th. So there's currently no last mile option. And I worry about specifically residents in that part of the neighborhood, you know, who are lower income, who might be stranded just because of schedules and having that flexibility, I think is important. So I think it's a combination of making sure we have the robust service that's necessary, but also having, you know, an alternative to get a mile away to the rapid station if you missed the bus by 10 seconds. So we'll talk about that deeper, but, you know, like I said earlier, all of these pieces fit together. So it's important to look at it holistically. And, you know, with that, Madam Chair, I will spare the committee of my voice and, you know, yield the floor to the next person. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Slife. And no, you had some very insightful questions and that your constituents will be very concerned about. Okay, next up, Councilman Brancatelli, Ward 12.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I didn't know that the scooters had baby seats for Charles Slife's kids. So that'll be interesting to see. And thank you for the presentation. I think this is very helpful. I apologize, I stepped out for a moment. I want to make sure this question wasn't asked, but did I hear correctly that they were taking all buses off of East 55th and East 79th on the north-south routes?
That is the proposal that we plan to discuss with the community. Yes, sir.
So
there would
you
still-
know, those are north and south routes, and you talked about improving the service east and west on St. Clair and Kinsman. How do we propose on getting folks north and south, especially connecting? Councilman Cleveland and I both share East 55th and East 79th Street. You have 2 major rapid stations, one on 55th, one on 79th. How do we propose getting folks to those rapid stations or getting from our neighborhoods to the power work centers like the clinic and UH and the university?
If I may, Councilman Brancatelli and Madam Chair, it does need some discussion. We do know that the East 79th Street route runs only Monday through Friday during the daytime. And on Saturday and Sunday, what people often do if they're trying to get from somewhere near Broadway and 55th to somewhere near St. Clair and 55th, and it's the weekend, what they're more likely to do today on the weekend is take a bus downtown on Broadway and transfer to the St. Clair bus to 55th Street. Now, when you make the Broadway bus and the St. Clair bus more frequent, that becomes actually more convenient than the number 79, which even when it does run, only runs once per hour. So if you get on even today, if you are near Broadway and 55th, or let's say you're near Broadway and 79th area, and you want to go to St. Clair 79th, and you look at Google and say, I want to get there, it may tell you, if the 79 is just about to pick you up, it'll tell you to get on the 79. But at other times when you do your trip plan, it'll tell you go downtown on something like a 19 or a 76, transfer to the number 1, and that's the fastest way to get there. So we do think that the very strong north-south route on 105th should be strengthened. We think that the service that's only hourly on 79th and only on weekdays, that those resources should be diverted. But again, we're happy to meet with you and your ward residents. We would provide another service on Fleet, so it's not that Fleet wouldn't have a bus. But again, this is just the beginning of that conversation, and thank you for bringing this point forward.
No, thank you. And and it is a challenge because as the councilwoman stated, I mean, in some cases it is a convenience and a choice. In many cases, it's not a choice. It's the only option. We lost all of our service when RTA closed their station at Grant Avenue and 71st Street. So you have to get yourself to Harvard, you have to get to Fleet Avenue, and some of those frequencies have been cut. And so not having a frequent enough route on 71st Street, those are all things we need to look at. And, I look forward to having that community engagement. And I certainly appreciate, on a personal note, the downtown, my son lives downtown. It's great that he doesn't have a car payment. And he certainly loves public transportation, and has become an avid scooter rider for that last mile when he needs to get around. But it's in some of our underserved markets, it just continues to raise an equity issue. Even though the frequency is low, the need is high. And so there may not be that one-for-one match of, well, we don't have enough riders. But living in poverty doesn't mean we shouldn't have opportunities though for access. So I look forward to meeting with you, and we'll be working, Councilwoman Cleveland and I will work with Southwick Village Development, as well as Councilman Griffin and Bishop, with Chris Alvarado, and set up a few community meetings. So thank you very much. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Councilman Brancatelli. And yeah, that's a very critical issue, the connectivity with the RTA stations. And I didn't want to really bring up anything else, but it also reminds me of the opportunity corridor, and whether, how your study and how what you're doing impacts with that, because the opportunity corridor should be up and completed by 2022, really just, very close to a year from now. And so I won't bring that up now, but that is another topic for further discussion. And then, as Councilman Brancatelli said, although the frequency is low, the need is high. And if, for those of us who've been around for, a little bit of time, a lot of the people who are not riding RTA now, who are not riding the current routes, are because they're no longer convenient. There was a time when, of course, there were more people, but there were buses that ran on Central, Quincy, and Cedar. And now, we're at Quincy and Cedar. And although it may seem equidistant, or very short distance to the health line, for a population of seniors and disabled individuals, that can be a very daunting trip. And again, in a city where, the sidewalks aren't always in the best condition. So, there's certainly a lot of things that we as council members will bring up to you that our residents face every day. And so, not seeing any more questions, then I want to say thank you to CEO Birdsong, to Dr. Kaver, to Mr. Freilich, your staff, and of course to your government relations representative, our friend Eric Johnson. Thank you, and this committee meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.